Matt from Matt AC Trains here again. Today we're going to be checking out a new locomotive I just recently acquired. Have you ever been looking for an engine that's nice, scale, detailed, and doesn't break the bank? Well, this little guy right here is probably going to be the option for you. Today we're going to be checking out the Williams by Bachmann 44 tonner. This is a fantastic model that's, as you can see, behind the other two scale models in front of it that look absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to show you guys that this is a great bang for your buck, similar to how the Lionel 060T is doing so successful right now. This is another great option if you're looking for something reasonably priced but has a lot of awesome features. So let's check it out. So before we get into the actual details and features of the locomotive itself, I thought we would go over the history of this engine. More specifically, why the heck do I have a Strasburg Railroad caboose behind this engine? And I'll tell you why. This engine, number 9331, is actually one of the very first engines that Strasburg ever acquired, outside of steam. This was an engine that they inherited not too long after the railroad was chartered. This engine actually was an engine that serviced the Strasburg Railroad for many, many years, several decades in fact. In fact, its last known appearance operating was back in 2012 or 13. And this engine was purchased by the Strasburg Railroad by 1968-69. And it served the railroad for a substantial amount of years, doing switching duties on the railroad, as well as pulling freight. And obviously, it also pulled passenger trains at some periods of time. What makes this engine interesting is it had two different paint schemes. I think the more familiar paint scheme that everyone's going to be knowing this engine for is when it was done up as number 33. But instead, Strasburg for a short time had this engine painted as number 33, but this was its original as delivered paint scheme. So that in itself made me want to order this engine right away. I had to get this because as you guys are aware, I have the Strasburg Railroad number 1 Plymouth switcher in my collection, and I have the new upcoming release from Lionel, the SW8 number 8618, and then I will have all 3 diesels from the Strasburg Railroad, which is going to be very cool and exciting in itself to have in model form. But that being said, the engine was a very serviceable engine for the Strasburg Railroad for many, many years, and it certainly deserves its respect by rail fans and just fans of the railroad itself like myself. And, you know, it's really great to see that this model actually exists. But there's actually another manufacturer that we're going to check out that made this engine as well that we're going to use for comparison. MTH also made 9331, but that engine is obviously a substantially more pricey model compared to this one. Hence why I want to showcase to you guys why this is a great engine for the money. So that being said, let's check over the features of the engine. So taking a look here at the front of the locomotive, you can see right off the bat you have this awesome separately fitted handrails. They look really, really nice. Although I would be careful when you're handling this engine because, as you can see, it is a bendable plastic. Now, that does make it less likely for these to break, but at the same time, they are still very fragile, and I would be careful because you would have to glue these in place. I had to do it once to these particular handrails here. So be careful when handling the engine. But that being said, it's just nice to see all this great detail on this model for the price. And speaking of the price, this is a $150 locomotive. And as you can see off the bat, it has heaps of detail. You have a separately applied horn here on the top. You have the little wind deflectors here on the top of the windows here. You also have the window wipers, which look great. You have the coupler cup bar here on the front of the engine. This nice zebra striping. The paint on this is actually really nice. It also has a molded-in grille here that looks great. And then an LED headlight on the top. 9331 here on the side. Looks really awesome. The paint on this is great, as I said before. You have the nice molded-in deck that looks really sharp. But let's check out the sides of the locomotive. So as you can see, the grille molded-in details for the panels to get to the motor of the engine looks absolutely awesome. Once again, you have the molded-in horn on the top. That looks great. And you also have the vents on the top of the locomotive, which looks really, really sharp. Okay, so here we have the two locomotives that I want to compare now. So on the right here, we have the MTH Premier version of the same locomotive. and on the left is the Williams that we were just looking over. So this is about a $450 locomotive, whereas this is a $150 locomotive. And as you can see, side by side, they don't look too much different from each other, which is actually the point I'm trying to make here. But there are slight differences I do want to point out if you are deciding which version of this engine you want to pick up. So right off the bat, you can see the paint is actually different. This is the correct Brunswick green, whereas the Williams one is almost a Brunswick black, I would say. Like, it still looks green from afar, but it's actually black up close when you're looking at the two. The other minor difference is on the front of the headlight there. The headlight is smaller on the Williams, whereas the one on the MTH is a lot larger. You could also see that the deck that a crewman would stand on for whatever reason, whether they get up on top of the engine or whatnot, you can see that there is a larger deck in front of the coupler here on the MTH versus the Williams is actually a lot shorter. The other major difference that actually changed the overall appearance of these engines is the Williams main frame where the housing for the motor would be is actually bulkier. So you can see this is a lot bulkier, whereas the MTH version is a little narrower and more prototypical to the actual model. However, the difference on the Williams is on the top, you can see that you have the vents here that are on the top of the locomotive that are not present on the MTH version. But let's keep on going along. Let's look at the sides. So here's the two engines side by side, nose to nose, I should say. And you could see, again, the overall main differences between the two that I just pointed out. But as you can also see, at the same exact time, this engine is the Williams is extremely close in quality to the MTH, which is why I even wanted to make this video, to showcase to you guys that this is a great bang for your buck scale locomotive, because this shapes up with this engine. Just obviously the Premier version is going to have more details. The other major difference is, actually, I take that back. I just noticed while recording this, both have the stepladder going up to the cab door, which is actually really nice to see that that's on both versions here. The horn placement is identical to each other. They are both the same in that regard. The only other minor difference is the roof is slightly curved on the Premier version, whereas the version on the left, which is the Williams, is a little different. But again, the major aesthetic difference is there is slightly more detail in the Premier version, and the frame is narrower and more correct to a 44 tonner, and the fact that the paint scheme is more correct on the MTH. But other than that, it's great. Obviously, I'm not going to go into the sounds of these two engines because there is no real comparison. The sounds are completely different, and one's command control, one is conventional. But besides that, I'm going to show you guys now how awesome this engine is to operate. So let's check that out. So now that we have her in my club's yard here, we're going to fire her up and let you guys hear some of the sounds and get a real feel for what this engine is. Now, take into account, for $150, this is not going to run nearly as smooth as, say, the 44 tonner we were just looking at by MTH. However, what I can tell you is it does actually have a decent sound set, and it does run pretty well for a conventionally operated piece. So let's check it out. So there she is, fired up with her stationary sounds. Here's the bell. Here's the horn, which actually I really like on this model. Now let's give her a run. Pretty smooth for a conventionally operated piece. But as you can see, it is a little finicky, but it is a nice engine for what it is. So we're going to now do some switching, and we're going to run the engine around for a minute, and then I'll wrap up the video. So let's check it out. So, folks, what do you think? I gotta tell you, I'm actually thoroughly impressed with this little locomotive. Though it's not the best performing engine for your collection, it's certainly a good looker, and certainly, as you can see from those last couple clips, when it does run at a scale speed on a layout like this or any layout really, you can see it can really impress for how small it is and how well it runs for not being a die-cast locomotive. This is definitely something I highly recommend to people. Um, it's a great bang for your buck, and I highly, highly recommend it to anyone. It looks great when it's going by, even though, as you saw in the switching yard, it had a little hiccups here and there, but that's besides the point. The point is that this is an engine that, if you're looking for something scale, realistic, has pretty good sounds, and doesn't break the bank, I recommend this or the 060T, which we're going to check out next time on the channel. But that being said, I thoroughly enjoy this little engine. Definitely something I'm going to keep around in my collection for quite some time. And I hope you guys enjoyed and got something out of this video. That being said, I'm Matty C, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.